evidence. First of all, what is insufficiency? And then what does it mean to be normal? So just to remind you again, that vitamin D is not truly a vitamin because the provitamin D is made in the skin and then it's converted enzymatically to pre-vitamin D. And then that goes to the liver where it's hydroxylated to 25-hydroxy-D and then to 125-hydroxy-D in the kidney. And one of the things that has happened recently is our understanding that there's probably some likelihood that 25D, which is carried by D-binding protein and by albumin, may have some activity in other cells, and therefore you may not need to depend so much on 125D for increased calcium absorption. However, that still remains somewhat of an area of investigation. And needless to say, the most active component in vitro when we test for calcium uptake is the kidney hydroxylated form 125-dihydroxy-D. So where do we get our 25-hydroxy-D? Well, 25-hydroxy-D is probably the pro-hormone, if we want to think of it that way, rather than as an active hormone. And then it gets converted to 125D. We get our 25D from solar exposure, principally, and then from diet. Okay, so 25D is carried by D-binding protein, principally, and by albumin. So there's very, very little free 25-hydroxy-D, we would say in the range of less than 1%. But as I mentioned, 25D can get into the cell and get converted to 125D in most cells. We used to think that 125D was only produced in kidneys, but we now know that it can be made elsewhere. So why are we so fixated on 25D? Because it's a measure of our exposure to vitamin D. It tells us exactly how much vitamin D we have in our circulation. And hence, in some ways, it's a good surrogate for its activity in the cell, which would be 125D. So, absence of D-binding protein or loss of albumin can lead to a reduction in 25D. And it's important to know that during acute illness, or in chronic disease with malnutrition, low levels of albumin can lead to lower levels of 25-hydroxy-D and DBP. So those conditions are sometimes seen in the ICU or in sick and malnourished individuals and doesn't necessarily reflect the true level of 25D. Okay, so my major message take home to you is 25D is a measure of exposure. Determinants of 25D are numerous. Solar exposure is one. It's a biggie. If you go in a submarine for 3 months, your 25D level is going to get down to 10 or lower because you do not have solar exposure, particularly if you're not taking any vitamin D in your diet. There are changes from winter to summer due to the apogee of the sun. We'll get to that. Dietary exposure helps. So if you take 25D, you're going to increase your 25D level. If you're going to take vitamin D supplements, you're going to increase your D level. And then something that's still somewhat mysterious to all of us is that the more overweight you are and the greater your body mass index, the lower your 25D. And that may relate to the conversion of pre-vitamin D to 25-hydroxy-D in the liver. Race and ethnicity probably play a role because there are genetic determinants, particularly of the vitamin D binding protein, which could make a difference. So solar exposure is clearly important. And we and others have proven for a long time that during the winter months, especially in the north, you get a 20 to 25% reduction in serum 25-hydroxy-D, just based on the fact that even being outside in the winter months, you're going to make less pro-D to pre-D. That's a non-enzymatic conversion that depends on the sunlight exposure. Darker skin pigmentation. So African Americans, some Hispanics, Indians, others may have lower 25D just because their pigment is darker, and therefore they make less 25D with southern exposure. So, and as I mentioned to you, 25-hydroxy-D is low in obesity. And this is very consistent. The greater your body weight, the lower your serum 25D. Although we don't understand it fully, it must have something to do with liver 25-hydroxy D production. And as I'll show you later on, when you give